Hello, greetings. So, time for another Gorean topic. And the topic today was inspired by discussion that's part of that has been going on Facebook for a while. And the question was basically, should you or shouldn't you follow the books when you're a Gorean? And there's actually been several of these discussions. And I think there are two ways to do this. And of course, a lot of gray area between these two ways. And that there isn't one single right way or wrong way. Now, one way is to sort of just take the Gore books and try to, as best as you can within our modern Western world, or whatever country you're living if you do not live in the West, try to emulate how the characters in the book live. This often includes both with terms, with all the customs they have in the books, the laws they have in the various city-states, and so on and so forth. Trying to, as much as you can, live as you would have done if you had lived on the fictional planet Gore. This is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is looking at the philosophy as its own separate entity, that the philosophy is a part of the books, is presented in the books, but that the way of life of the characters themselves is just fiction, and as such doesn't really have that much to do with the philosophy. Usually then you combine this philosophy with the ways of life, the ideas and so on of the various great thinkers that has inspired John Norman, like Nietzsche, for example, and also the various cultures that the Gore books are based on, Viking, Greco-Roman, and so on and so forth. And you form a philosophy and a way of life with that, but you don't necessarily live as somebody would have lived in the books. And I've heard various names of this. I've heard that the one category is referred to as book Goreans, but then again, book Goreans is also a way to refer to the fictional characters in the books, and the others as philosophical Goreans. I have heard them referred to as traditionalists and progressive Goreans, and so on and so forth. I don't think that putting a direct name on it is the most important. Now, for me, I fall into the philosophy grouping. For me, and I do not mean any disrespect for anyone that do it this way, but for me, just adopting the lifestyle of my book that becomes a bit more BDSM tricky. And I don't mean it that way because it's a really derogatory way to say it. But basically, to me, this is the philosophy that's the important part. And there's a lot of places where the way of life in the books is contrary to the philosophy. Let's take the whole Priest King debacle. And yes, I know I made a video not long ago how to make your actual religion out of the Priest Kings because I'm a chaos and I like that sort of things. But basically, if you look at how the Priest Kings are in the books, they are the exact opposite of what you would want to do, uh, what you want to follow on the philosophy. So, for example, I know I shocked quite a few Goreans over at Color Me when they said, "Oh, what if you had been living in the books and you suddenly have become aware of that the priest kings were just aliens and they had taken you from Earth and they had used you and they had..." And I said, "I would gather up my weapons and I would try to get into one of their nests and kill as many of them as possible, knowing full well that I would probably be killed before I got the chance, but yeah." And there were a few that said, "Oh, but you can't do that because they were..." Fine. Because it's completely opposite the ideas of freedom and personal responsibility to follow creatures that play God. Following an actual god, that becomes a little bit differently, but to be the playthings of aliens, respecting their strength, Absolutely, respecting them as basically chieftains. Absolutely. But the way they are presented in it, no. And there's also a lot of other things, like, for example, the idea that a woman is only free as long as a man allows her to be. And I've discussed this one before, because that's a complete antithesis to the concept of freedom presented in the Gorean philosophy. Because basically, the way Goreans view freedom is a very precious thing that are yours if you fight for it. Basically, if you are willing to fight and die for your freedom, nobody can take it away from you. They can take away your life, but if you then refuse to serve, they cannot take away your freedom. And this is also evident with, for example, quite a few free women choosing death over becoming slaves. But then at the same time saying, oh, but a free woman is only free as long as a man allow her. No. If your freedom is based on what others allow you, then you're not free. You're a slave with privilege. And these are just some of the things where the philosophy presented and what they actually do in the books do not well mesh. Among other things, because the books are stories told from a loads of different characters' point of view. There's loads of different cultures and the groupings within this world, and so on and so forth. So yeah, for example, the philosophy that this is based on would not make it a good idea to go around and slaughter those big pacifists talking spiders. I've now forgotten the name now. But on in R, that's a popular hobby. But by the philosophies these are based on, and the Gorean philosophy in general, slaughtering creatures that will not fight back is just dishonorable. And yes, that's what I do. So just taking the books and say, oh, I'm just gonna sort out and just gonna take as much as I can from the books and apply it into my life. No question about it, no thinking about it. I'm just gonna try to make my life as much as I can, like if I was living on this planet. To me, that doesn't work. No, I'm not saying that if it works for you that it's wrong. But for me, it's not the right way for me to say it like that. Now, for example, I'm a free woman. I'm also a pagan, so I will wander around quite naked in ritual. Have no problem with it. I wear earrings. I mean, I feel naked without earrings. I wear earrings constantly. In the Gore books, only slaves wear earrings. But I feel this is part of the fiction, not part of the philosophy. And I shake my head when I hear, like, over at Gorean Voice, there was an article about, oh no, silk, that was a slave material. So when a woman who had never ever read the books wore a silk blouse, she was expressing a desire to be a slave. No, she was expressing the desire to have a nice blouse of a very nice, expensive material that looks very good on. Because we don't have this social context for it. So, yeah. No. And there's a lot of things in the book. Like, for example, we had an idiot over at Color Me once that said, no, he wanted to brand girls just as they did in the books. Because he wanted to make everything as much as in the books as he could possibly do. And I know a few of us said that you can't do that. You will just send your slave to the hospital because the way slaves are marked in the books are based on how cows are branded. They have hide. Humans do not. You can't just take it like that. So, yeah. On the same time, many of those, let's just call them book Goreans for now, basically call those of us that are philosophers. Philosopher groups. philosophical Goreans. Good term. Philosophical Goreans for basically cherry picking because not sure it is that we accept the philosophy and we try to live our lives by that, and then some of us just picks a few elements from the books that we feel resonates with us. However, what you have to remember is that we're not cherry picking. I want this and I want this and I want this and I want this. It's more that we see the philosophy as important and everything else as just icing on the cake. Cake is good without icing. Just better with a bit of icing. So, yeah, I think that, and going back to the Trek analogy, and I don't mean it the way that some of you might take it, but basically, you have some people who try to live as much as if they were in Star Trek as they possibly can. They wear Star Trek uniforms. They have their house decorated as the Starship Enterprise. They use terms from the book. They have their microwave placed in the oven and try to look like one of those things that make food things. Yes, I know. My geek card just got a black mark. Oh, I need to rewatch Star Trek. Anyway, you get my point, what it is. Um, and they basically try their best to live as a character in that setting would. That would be the equivalent of a book Gorean. While there are some people, for example, there's one organization of people who feel that Star Trek is a goal to strive towards. So they try to look at the philosophy. They want to basically value all life and value various species' right to develop as they live and so on. So, for example, they are extremely vocal against disturbing the various rainforest tribes and so on, and want them to be allowed to develop on their own. They often have bait sales and develop and give the money to scientific research. Uh, they very often are against having money as the sole idea of commerce and so on and so forth. They try to live by the philosophy of it. While they generally wear your everyday clothes, they talk in your everyday way, and they don't have plastic ears put on here to get them pointing. And that would be the equivalent of a philosophical Gorean. Basically, we take the philosophy from the Gore books, but we don't really bother that much with with the social structure of these fantasy worlds. So that, for example, I have no problems having a woman wearing earrings. And while I do think that various people will like one side of it or the other side of it, and of course there's people in all lines of it. Some people are more philosophical, but have a bit of the book adherence idea as well, or the other way around. There's a lot of gray area there. I think that some people might be more happy on one side and others might be more happy on the other side. And I'm not saying that one side is better than the other. But I am saying that if your goal is to follow the philosophy, as most Goreans I have met claim to be, then just taking the books and trying to copy that life in as much as you can into your everyday life is not the way to go about it, because basically, yeah, you won't get the philosophy that way. You'll be able to learn a lot of alien words for various forms of food and dances and clothing and attire and all of that, right? But you won't get the philosophy, because the philosophy is more hidden behind between the lines and spelled out in the lifestyle of a lot of the various areas in the core books. So basically, what do I think you should do? I think you should sit down and consider what is it that you are after. Have you fallen in love with the lifestyle, the way of life presented in the core books? Then perhaps just trying to copy the books down into basically your everyday life is the right way for you to go to get the most meaningful life possible. But if it is the philosophy behind, then I recommend basically studying the various philosophical sources that the books are based on and figuring out the philosophy and applying that to your life with or without the social elements of the books. So basically, I actually recommend that it's not this is what you should do and immediately decide to become a Gorean. This is what you should do. I think you should sit down and think about what is it that you and your household wants to get out of being Gorean. If you want to get out of it, basically a BDSM relationship with a bit of a Conan feel um, and some nice fancy slave positions, just do that. Just focus on the slavery elements, ignore everything else, and you're set. Be happy. If you want to live as the characters in the book as much as you can, basically feel that that lifestyle is the best way for you, try to copy the lifestyle of the books as much as you can and be happy with that. And if you want to live by the philosophy, basically the philosophy that's built up from various aspects of Nietzsche, or at least the earlier works of Nietzsche, various forms of historical societies, and so on and so forth, mixed in with your Norman's own ideas, then base yourself around the philosophy and then decide how much of uh, the cultural elements you want to bring into it as well. Because basically there are many ways to be Gorean, and I think that one of the problems within our community is that we have this tendency we want to find the one golden way, the one way TM that we are going to be Gorean, and that's the only true and right way, and everybody else are pretenders. And I don't believe in that. I believe that here we have some books that inspires people in different ways. And as such, basically, uh, they want to organize the life if they want to be lifestyle Goreans different ways with it. Now, for example, for me who are transhumanist, the transhumanist element of the Gore books is something that I bring into it because those are important for me. However, the various forms of dress and attire and so on and so forth that I wear, I have no interest in that whatsoever. I don't feel that it's part of the philosophy. I don't feel that it will enrich my life. And so on, and therefore I feel that what you should do, the first thing when you decide to become a Gorean, isn't to decide how much of the books am I going to include in my life. No, you should sit down and think, what do I want this to do for me in my life? And then act accordingly. So yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. Have a great day and blessed be.